Donkey Kong Bananza is not even out for a month, and yet the speedrun of the game is already utterly insane. It goes out of bounds, it actually skips 2 out of the 5 Bananza transformations in the game. It already skips boss fights, sequence breaks certain sequences into tiny sequence pieces, uses very specific tech to cheat the lead up towards the final boss fight, and even beats the game without entering certain layers at all. The world record is already way below 90 minutes, with new records dropping almost daily. And all of this is before we even talk about DK's sophisticated movement system in the game, which turned out to be, dare I say it, truly bananas. After only a couple of weeks, Bananza is shaping up to becoming an incredibly interesting speedrun. And I don't think this is merely by coincidence. I actually believe that this is by design. So in this video, we're going to do 2 things. First, we'll take a look at how the Bananza speedrun actually works. We'll talk about the basic movement tech, how the biggest sequence breaks work, and which exploits allow for all those massive skips. But second, and equally interesting, we will also take a look at certain aspects of Bananza's design that make the speedrun possible in the first place, because Bananza marks a drastic shift in Nintendo's design philosophy. Finally, as for spoilers, since the game is still pretty new, I'll do my best not to spoil any major things in this video. However, we will discuss stages and tricks that cover stuff going further into the game than what was shown in the trailers during the marketing. There will be another separate spoiler warning before we talk about how the lead up to the final boss can be broken. Awesome. So gentle ladies, gentlemen, and gentle people in general, are you ready? Then let's do this. The game starts, and it already starts with quite an interesting skip. You see, the game begins right in front of a delicious banana. These bananas act as skill points in the game. Every time we devour 5 delicious bananas, Donkey levels up and gains a skill point that we can spend onto one of many abilities. So what's the interesting skip that is happening here? Well, we're about to put Donkey on a pretty strict diet today. He won't be eating many delicious bananas during the speedrun. As a matter of fact, he will only get his hands on 5 meager bananas in total. There is only a single skill that we will unlock over the course of the run. The very first skip is us skipping the very first banana. Since we barely get any skill points, our power level stays flat during the entire run, making mistakes towards the end of it extremely punishing. I ended up grabbing a bunch more bananas to increase my total health a little bit, because I'm still learning the run, and being able to survive an additional mistake really helps later on, but competitive speedruns are performed with only 3 hearts in total. Awesome. So let's talk about Donkey Kong's movement. Generally, the fastest way to move around in Bananza is via turf surfing. Whenever we have a long horizontal distance to cover, it is fastest to tear out a nice chunk of environment and to surf on top of it. If we only have to cover a short distance, then spamming DK's rolling move is usually fastest. If we have to climb a surface, then climbing is usually not the preferable climbing method to climb it. What climbing technique climbs in a superior way to climbing, I hear you ask? Well, quick monkey hops, of course. If with the jump button adjusts the right rhythm while on a vertical surface, then DK hops his way up faster than he would be with mere monkey climbing. Finally, what is the fastest way to drop down during the layer transition sequences? Well, that's actually kind of funny. As it turns out, the fastest way to dive is actually not via the fast diving ability. It is actually faster to spam the dive ability and to cancel it immediately after starting it over and over again. This little optimization actually saves dozens of precious seconds over the course of a full run. Awesome. So that's the movement basics. But what about advanced movement tech? Well, there are 2 advanced movement maneuvers that allow for tons of sequence breaks in the game. 2 movement tricks that are conveniently already used during the first stages to break precious sequences. So first, the turf jump combo. So most people probably realized that it is possible to perform a turf jump and then to immediately cancel it again to cover a bit more distance. What some people might have missed, however, is that it is possible to cover even more distance if we attack the air with the piece of terrain directly after canceling the turf surf. The sequence of inputs here is to jump, to turf surf immediately again, to do a normal attack, to hit the jump button, and to follow it up with a roll. This sequence of inputs actually allows us to completely sequence break certain parts of the game. At the beginning of the lagoon layer, for example, our strong Kong is confronted with a problem. We want to reach the other island here, but the water level is sadly so low that the bridge uselessly floats below us. Usually, we'd have to tediously raise the water level here step by step until the uselessly floating bridge finally floats in a more useful spot. However, if we carefully perform the turf jump combo we just discussed, then we can easily reach the other side of the bridge without ever raising the water level even a single bit, saving minutes. The other tricky trick jump sequence? Well, the other sequence breaking jump trick is almost the exact same input sequence, but instead of using the beautiful piece of terrain that we just forcefully tore out of its natural habitat to attack the air in front of us, we perform an uppercut instead. If we jump, turf surf again, and then do an uppercut, then we freeze in air for a moment. If we now jump out of this state, we gain even more height than we usually do. We can add even more height to our jump by first performing a down smash and by then immediately cancelling it with a roll. This combo allows us to jump incredibly high, easily enabling us to reach places we were not yet supposed to reach. Awesome. So that's one combo to cover vertical distances and one to gain height. Now let's use our newly learned powers to completely obliterate the canyon layer, shall we? Check this out. First, we can do a normal turf jump trick sequence at this spot to cover enough distance to make it to the other platform in front of us. This little innocent looking skip actually skips an entire sub-layer, including a boss fight. Next, we use the uppercut variation of this jump on top of this little tree child to reach the floating tower above us. Here, we climb upwards and jump from here to skip the entire mountain. And if we now move over to the crane and jump off of it, then we can actually reach the very top of the stage and we pretty much finish the canyon layer. 4 jumps is all that it takes to reach the final boss here, which, dare I say it, is not only Ray, but also a lot of who. So if you were wondering how speedrunners were already achieving such insane times, these jumps are about half the answer. And those 2 trick jumps are actually the explanation how the snake transformation in the game can actually be skipped. You see, the snake transformation is usually required to reach this floating key. This key, however, is not floating high enough to escape the angry fists of an agile ape. Using the uppercut turf jump trick, we can easily punch the key back into its lock, making it possible to leave the layer without learning to transform ourselves into a snake. But now we face another problem. How are we supposed to climb the snake tutorial tower? In the snake tutorial tower, all the fancy snake skills are tutorialized, yet we sneakily snuck by the snake, sneaking into the snake tower, unable to snakeify ourselves. How to skip the sneaky snake tutorials, sucking at all the sneaky snake tricks? Well, the answer is once again, of course, by tearing out terrain. You see, a simple turf jump allows us to make it onto the first layer of the tower. Here we can use another turf jump to make it over the explosive barrels to reach this corner. A well-timed double turf jump, air punch, terrain jump, quick roll allows us to make it up onto this platform. If we next position ourselves on top of the very energetic energy melon, we can reach the next platform using the exact same trick. The next trick, however, is a bit tricky. Here we have to gain a ton of height again, while at the same time avoiding the explosive barrels before air punching our way back onto the platform. So getting this one actually took me a couple of tries, but it is very much possible to jump onto this platform as well, and honestly, with a bit of practice, it isn't even too bad. And this is all that we need. The rest of the snake tower can easily be snuck through without the snake. Hooray! We just skipped an entire Bananza. So let's talk about the Ceave transformation. Because not only does the current world record beat the game, skipping any instances of zebrafication altogether, but the run actually doesn't even enter the freezer layer in which we learn the zebra transformation. The thing is the following. After exploring the inner world of our planet for a bit, we eventually reach an underground layer called the Divide. There are 2 other layers that are connected to the Divide, the freezer layer and the forest layer. The freezer layer is where we usually learn the zebra Bananza, the forest layer is where we learn the ostrich one. The freezer and the forest layer both lead back into the same layer again, a layer called the conjunction. To proceed, we have to flip 2 switches that raise a bridge in the conjunction. One switch is only reachable at the exit of the forest layer, one only reachable at the exit of the freezer layer. Only once both bridges are raised, we're able to cross the chasm and to continue our journey. Cool, so the question is obviously how to cross the chasm that remains after finishing only the forest layer, but without ever entering the freezer layer. This here is the chasm that we have to cross. Quite the distance, isn't it? No turf jump trickery in the world is going to get us to the other side here. So how do we get there? Well, with the help of a little broken bird transformation. As it turns out, the ostrich Bananza not only allows us to flap through the air to cross small gaps, it also allows us to glitch ourselves over gigantic chasms, which brings us back to the beginning of this video, the one skill that we actually have to unlock. We need the skill that allows us to float in the air for a little bit after the normal ostrich flight ends. Why do we need that? Well, because as it turns out, there's a rather funny interaction between this skill and punching with a piece of terrain while floating. We hit the float button as an ostrich and then immediately let go of it again and attack while carrying terrain. Then we perform an attack in the air. If we now hit the float button again, followed immediately by another attack however, then another attack happens. And then another one. And another one, over and over again. This way we can perform over a dozen attacks before losing any height. And that's not even all, because once the flight ends, we can drop our piece of terrain to double jump, which conveniently also resets our mid-air roll. Finally, we can float down slower if we continue to punch the innocent air right in front of us. If we combine all of this, then we can float in air for a ridiculous amount of time. Pretty much every chasm in the game can be flapped over like this. This float tech just allows for unbelievable sequence breaks everywhere in the game. We barely hit the ground in the forest layer. We can pretty much skip the entire storm area. And most interestingly of all, it is actually possible to cross the chasm using this trick. It's not even that difficult. This little trick makes it possible to proceed in the game without ever entering the freezer layer and without learning the zebra transformation. However, the zebra is required in another spot in the game. We actually need it to reach the final boss fight. But before we discuss how we skip the zebra transformation there, let's first take a look at a fun little useful glitch. The landfill layer is usually just a relaxed little area in between the bigger stages of the game. In this layer, our job is it to dig ourselves deeper and deeper until we eventually reach a boss fight. Here's the problem: digging is slow. Here's the solution. If we climb upwards at this spot and keep climbing until we reach this overhanging ceiling here, then we can gently push our beloved ape into the corner until he all of a sudden recalls his adventures back on the Nintendo 64 and decides to pop through the wall one more time for Donkey Kong 64's sake. And now things are about to become fun. You see, we're now out of bounds and can actually fall off the side of the stage. If we do this, we just fall. And fall and fall until we're almost at the bottom of the layer. Just before we hit the voiding out zone, however, we activate the broken powers of the ostrich to once again flap back into the stage and to punch our way back in, conveniently right beside the entrance to the boss fight. We just skipped digging through the entire layer. Hooray! And with this, let's talk about the craziest skip of them all. The skip allowing us to reach the final boss. If you're sensitive to spoilers, you may want to skip to the timestamp on screen. Okay, the problem is the following. The very final part of the final stage is all about the zebra transformation. There are 3 zebra bridges that are all leading towards a cannon barrel. Only the zebra transformation can walk on those bridges, otherwise they immediately collapse. Those are literally the last obstacles in the game before the final boss fight. So as soon as we step onto the first bridge, 2 things happen. First, the lava begins to rise incredibly fast. If our monkey bottom touches the exceptionally hot liquid, it's immediately game over. The second thing that happens, well, the bridge dissolves. We can't walk on this bridge as anything other than a zebra. We just fall right through it. It is as if the bridge doesn't even exist. As far as we are concerned, the bridge here is air. We can't stand on it in any way whatsoever. So we have to make it into this barrel first without touching the bridge. Then somehow cross this even longer, non-existent bridge till we reach this barrel, and finally have to somehow reach another barrel without anything to stand on. So here's the good news. It is actually possible to use the ostrich to reach the first barrel using the air stalling tech from before. The bad news, however, we have to drop our terrain to cover the distance. But without this piece of terrain, it's not possible to reach the next barrel. Oh and no. Is this the end of our zebra-less ambitions? Has Nintendo finally found a way to force the zebra onto us against our wishes? Well, certainly not. Check this out. First, we grab a piece of gold terrain. How do we get gold? Well, as it turns out, the fire snakes that chased us before are actually made out of liquid gold that we can inhale using our fantastic lung capacities. If we happen to respawn here, the snakes are no longer around, but we can easily change this by forcefully bonking our poor ape's head into the wall behind us. This activates the snakes, and after a couple of seconds, they emerge from the lake. Cool, so we inhaled a bunch of gold. What next? Well, next comes the fun part. We pull out our gold, we transform into an ostrich, and then we flap towards the barrel. Halfway through, however, we do something unexpected. We stop for a moment mid-air, we drop our precious piece of gold on a brittle bridge, we now land on the gold piece, and the second we land on it, we jump off of it again while picking up the gold at the same time. This allows us to reset our flight without losing the gold piece, which gives us enough reach to make it into the barrel. Now on to the fun part. You see, the barrel now does shoot us to the next layer, but it does so at a very low height, meaning that it is impossible for us to reach the next exit barrel using the same trick. Because of this, we do the following. We keep pressing the flutter button as soon as we regain control, so that we float above the bridge for a moment. We aim our piece of terrain towards the fire snake in front of us and throw it at it. The shiny yet deadly gold explodes and creates a golden surface onto which we can actually climb. We climb upwards, break out another piece of gold, fly towards the next snake, throw the piece at this snake, land again, climb again, break out a final piece of gold, and use it to finally reach the exit barrel, and hooray! This is all that it takes. With this we can easily reach the final boss arena and actually skip the entire Zebra Bananza. Hooray! So those are the basic tricks that the current Bananza speedrun uses to already pull off insane times. But we aren't quite finished here yet. At the beginning of the video, we talked about the very first skip in the game. And in a certain way, I believe that this very first skip is actually the most important one in Bananza. And this skip is us passing up the very first banana in the game. Because us not eating this banana is emblematic for tons of things in Bananza. Skipping this banana here is not a glitch or an exploit. The game simply allows us to skip it. There is no monkey that stops us and tells us to eat the banana first. There is no tutorial prompt forcing us to turn back. There is nothing stopping us. If we don't want to eat the banana, then we don't have to eat it. As a matter of fact, we can skip every banana in the game. And this is not by accident. You see, the Bananza team actually gave an interview on the official Nintendo site leading up to the release of the game. There they talk about a lot of interesting things, but there's one specific statement in this interview that was just echoing in my head the entire time while I was learning the speedrun. Towards the end of the interview, Takahashi, one of the game's directors, is asked if there is something that they want to say to the people that are about to play the game. And he gave a really interesting answer. Here's what he said. There's a lot of leeway in terms of progression in this game. For example, locations or part of the story that you can skip without suffering any consequences. When the game progresses in a way we hadn't intended, we call this a sequence break in development terminology. Typically in game development, restrictions are put in place to prevent this from happening. But since this game is all about destruction, we wanted people to play freely. Truth be told, restrictions make things a lot easier for us developers, but please do experiment. You see, they knew about most of the things that break the game. But not only did they know about them, they actually chose to leave these things in the game consciously. They obviously know that the water racing can be skipped. They know about the sequence breaks in the canyon. They know that the snake Bananza can be skipped. Heck, they probably designed the tower deliberately in such a way that the Bananza can barely be skipped. There's a decent chance that they even were aware of the ostrich flight stalling tech and decided to leave it in the game. And I love that they did this. It makes the game so much more interesting. It allows for so many cool tricks. It is the foundation for one of the most interesting speedruns I've ever seen, and it just adds so much to the game without taking anything away from it. You see, I've been complaining for years that Nintendo's games sometimes suffer because Nintendo tends to have a very specific experience for the player in mind, a very specific experience which they then try to force upon us. And I think that the metaphor that Takahashi used when he was describing their thought process when it comes to those things in Bananza is just really interesting and really revealing about how they approach these kind of things normally. Because he talks about players finding sequence breaks in the game in a metaphor of destruction, as if a sequence break would destroy the experience. After all, he says, that it is only because the game is all about destruction that they decided to let the players play freely. Since the game is about destruction, we wanted people to play freely. It's just such a revealing phrase in my humble opinion. Nintendo usually has a certain experience in mind and doesn't want players to break free from it, because if they were to destroy the intended experience. But people that are doing speedruns or weird challenge runs in Nintendo games, these people are obviously not destroying their experience. They are creating new experiences for themselves. And it is this very quality of Bananza that I enjoyed the most about the game. I have a couple of small quarrels with Bananza, but overall I think it turned out really great. And I think a huge reason of why it turned out great is because Bananza actually allows us to create our own experiences with the game instead of forcing certain ones upon us. It allows us to ask the question, can I still beat the game without a skill point? Can I reach this key up there and skip the snake transformation? Can I complete this challenge room in a dumb way? Can I jump over there? Can I build a bridge to this point? And so on. It is this freedom in how we approach the game that turned a good experience into a great one for me. It is this freedom that has led to Bananza being such an interesting speed game. I love that Nintendo allowed us to destroy their intended experience here for once, and I would love it if more of their games would embrace this destruction, because this destruction may not be as destructive as they believe. Hooray! So here we have it, an overview over how the early speedrun of Donkey Kong Bananza is shaping up, and me singing praises to Nintendo for not stumbling over their own shoelaces for once. Before we wrap this up, just two more things. So first, a gigantic thank you to all my wonderful patrons whose names are currently scrolling by. These wonderful people not only regularly get access to small additional scripts and hidden stuff, but their generous contributions are also the bananium that is currently fueling this entire operation. A gigantic thank you to all of them for this. Second, I actually encountered two quite weird and strange interactions while playing Bananza, and while both are probably nothing major, I thought I'd show them to all of you anyway. The first one is a really weird wall phasing. Here, I was transforming into the Kong Bananza at the same time as an enemy swung at me, causing my little Kong to phase through the wall in a surprisingly wall-negating move. I wasn't able to reproduce this, but I suspected the collisions get a bit confused if we were getting moved around at the same time as we were transforming into a Bananza, which might be useful at some other point in the game. The second strange thing that I encountered happened here. I was messing around with terrain while trying to figure out what is the highest I can jump when all of a sudden this happened. DK pushed down, doing a downwards attack, and collided with a piece of terrain which all of a sudden accelerated him out of nowhere and bounced him around. I suspect that there is a weird interaction if a downward slash connects with a piece of terrain that is itself in the air, but I also wasn't able to reproduce that one. Hooray! The next video will be a big critique of Bananza over on the Perspective channel, so there's something to look forward to in case that is something you're interested in. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this tiniest of videos. If you did, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up and maybe feel especially like an ostrich punching the air with shiny yet deadly gold, and want to hit the subscribe button as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, lots of hugs.